F Sports.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in everybody to the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere else. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste, and here with me are Jarvis Davis, Aaron Freeman, and Tori McElhaney. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to, but faster. Post your job free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And of course, this Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And for the second week in a row, guys, not having a party at all because the Falcons had their chances to get a dub twice. Last Sunday, rookie QB, well, basically down the dirty birds. And just yesterday, it was this guy, random guy, who was teaching his O-line his cadence minutes before the game started and was so feverishly trying to get everything together that it rendered his coach as hoarse as I am right now from trying to teach him to get ready for this game. So it's now another come to Jesus moment as we break down the Falcons 31-28 loss to the Vikings on Sunday with our top three takeaways. Jarvis, I know from yesterday's postcast that you felt some type of way. We're almost 24 hours later and interested to see how you're feeling. But one of the thoughts you had was this: Falcons seem to be traveling down the road. You say Arthur Smith doesn't really want him to go down.
Yeah, because looking at the press conference after the game, it just kind of seems like he was defeated. You know, he was very open about his thoughts and visions for play callings and sequence of plays and why he called this. And we know Arthur Smith, in his confident stage, he's like, hindsight 2020, a lot of variables. He's very kind of close to the vest when it comes to, talking about those things. And I feel like right now, if you're in a space where you feeling like that feeling defeated and you feel like you don't have any answers, and that's the type of feeling that I got back in 2020 when Dan Quinn went down or got fired, because the team just looked like they just didn't have a clue, and it's just so many questions that you had as far as from what the product was, and the product was just bad. Because I was having a conversation with one of the Atlanta media folks, a friend of the show, and I was just saying how, she brought up how sometimes Arthur Smith talks about, people fantasy football and all that stuff, right? And sometimes, her football knowledge wasn't like what she felt like it should be, to be able to ask certain questions. I was like, well, at the end of the day, I'm not a chef, but I know what tastes bad. And I know what we've been seeing on Sundays. It's been bad. It's been bad. Because at the end of the day, I don't care how it's made. I don't care what the preparation that goes into the food that I like to eat. But doggone it, it better taste good when I see it. And what we've been seeing on Sundays, it just hasn't been good. And I don't think that who would have thought that 9 games into the season that people are talking about firing Arthur Smith. Like, people are literally saying those words, uttering those words, saying, you know what? It's time for Arthur Smith to go. Like, that's where we are right now. And I don't think that he wants to be in a situation where game by game, oh, okay, is it going to happen this time? Or where are the reports now? And I think that for him, he needs to get this thing figured out, because you don't want to travel down this road of, all right, when is it going to happen? Or when is the hammer coming down? Or is Terry Fontenot going to be held responsible too? Or looking at the talent on this roster, like, now we're trying to figure out like who to blame from an organizational standpoint. So you don't want to go down that road right now as the head coach of this team.
Yeah, and that's a tough one, because honestly, that's not a conversation I think any of us thought we were going to have at any point during the season, because so many good moves really were made in the offseason, especially on the defensive side of the ball. We saw situations where Arthur Smith would say it about Desmond Ridder, but I'm going to say it about Arthur Smith, where you make a mistake one time, but you wouldn't see that same mistake made twice, right? Whether it was play calling or utilization of players, however, whatever the case may be. And now it's just, I don't know. I think that there might be a little something to what you're saying, because there is a level of kind of, and I'm going to say head scratching, for lack of a better term, right now, what's going on. But Tori, the one place I think there's been finger pointing and there's been head scratching, but maybe it's not warranted this time, might be with Taylor Heinicke, because you can't really lay the blame at his feet from yesterday. 21 of 38, 268 yards and a touchdown, just one interception. I think, to your point, we now know earlier than we did last week, hey, Falcons are going to go ahead and stick with their guy, at least for this game coming up against the Cardinals. And you feel like, if we don't know anything else that might be right moves, at this point, we know that might be the right move.
Yeah, so we talked to Arthur Smith this morning, or I guess this afternoon on Monday, and he came right out when asked about the quarterback situation and said, we're going to stick with Taylor Heinicke through the bye week. And again, he said, this is in the short term. We'll reassess the quarterback position coming out of the bye week. And he said, certainly I don't want this to be a week-to-week thing that we're having to have this conversation about the quarterback. So I imagine, just in my own head, that coming out of the bye week, they'll say, this is who we're going to stick with for the remainder of the year, barring injury or anything crazy. So that's kind of where the situation stands as is. And I think, honestly, that at this point, as much as we were talking about the quarterback situation over the last, probably month and a half at this point. Yeah. I mean, it's been a topic of conversation with all of us and with the Falcons fan base as a whole for a long time now. But at this point in time, after this loss to the Vikings, to me, the conversation isn't about the quarterback anymore. I think this has evolved beyond that. And, I think it's a piece of it. But the main offensive issues that this team has shown from one week to the next persisted regardless of who was under center. And I think that's kind of where you have to look at how they move forward. And that's just where I feel like there are things to be gleaned from the quarterback conversation, but it's not the only thing that we should be talking about. And it's not, honestly, it was funny because after the game, it's like we're talking about so many other things, missed opportunities and the turnovers and not capitalizing on turnovers, that when I looked at kind of my list of themes of the game, quarterback was really far down on the list. So for me, moving forward, it's like, yes, quarterback is going to be a topic of conversation, but if you go out and you come out after the bye week and you have this long-term decision and you're like, we're riding with Taylor Heinicke or we're riding with Desmond Ridder until the end of the year, then that's what it is. And you move forward and you try and fix what you can.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's interesting, Tori, because I love the way you put that. In weeks past, this was the topic of conversation to the point where we had to figure out how, we had so many different angles that in our 3 segments, we were finding different ways to talk about it. But yeah, we are at the point in place where that is not, I don't even know, Tori, honestly, after we saw what we saw yesterday, if it's even the top 3 topics of conversation, if you will, at this point. There's so many other things that we have to take into consideration. Another one, Aaron, that we didn't think we'd be talking about or shaking our heads or scratching our heads about was the defense, right? And I think you started off with our pre-brief conversation saying, hey, there are no words, except maybe for the defense, because now, and granted, we do take into consideration some of the, I'll say, dust-ups yesterday and some near season-ending issues that almost cropped up yesterday. And, of course, we have the season-ending issue with Grady Jarrett. But honestly, if you take all that away, I think you would still maybe say in the last 2, maybe if not 3 weeks, that it does make you still scratch your head like, is it the defense? Like, is this the defense we really thought it was going to be now versus where we were when we kicked off the offseason and training camp?
Yeah, and I think, I don't want to heap too much blame or criticism on the defense, just because when you compare it to what we've been talking about all year long with the offense, like the defense has gone out there, in 7 out of their 9 games and played really well. And so it's just like, yeah, like they get the benefit of the doubt that we don't necessarily give the offense. But we've seen the last couple of weeks, with the Tennessee game and this week, I think 59 points given up over the last 2 games, a lot of explosive plays. You saw a lot of the poor tackling that led to Josh Dobbs' ability to really make a lot of plays with his legs, especially in the second half. And it just feels like, that high that we were riding on for, the better part of 7 weeks going into the season with the defense consistently showing up, consistently getting stops. We're coming back down to earth a little bit these last couple of games against offenses that you wouldn't necessarily think would be able to have the success that they've had, given, their concerns at the quarterback position with Will Levis, Jaron Hall, and Josh Dobbs. And that was one of the things that, looking at this season in the schedule, you were like, oh, with Aaron Rodgers basically out for the season, like the Falcons don't have to really worry about any sort of high level quarterbacks that can really do a lot of damage. And this defense should be able to hold up for the entirety of the season. And now with some of the struggles they've had the last couple of weeks, you are a little bit worried about what's coming up with potentially Kyler Murray making his start next week. And then, Derek Carr's, I would say, maybe I'm biased, but would be mostly a disaster in New Orleans. But like, he's played good enough that you would think if Will Levis and Josh Dobbs can do this, and Josh Dobbs not practicing can do what he did, all those guys look like they can do some damage. And so you wonder a little bit about this defense. Is the defense, which hasn't been a concern for pretty much the entirety of this year until the last couple of weeks, are we going to have to start talking more about this defense not necessarily holding up their end of the bargain?
Yeah, especially as you start to look around the corner and up the way to New Orleans. Of course, I'm in Louisiana right now. That's why I say it that way. But you look at them, and their defense is turning into the bend, don't break version of the Falcons defense, as they now sit atop the NFC South. And low key, slowly but surely, it may not be Derek Carr, maybe the guys around him, but they're doing just enough on offense to get the success. And they're starting to kind of trend up in a weird way. And of course, we're going to talk about it a little bit more when we go into the deep dive, guys. But first and foremost, I'd like to tell you guys before we go there about this great resource for top talent that is called LinkedIn. So now when you think about LinkedIn, every new potential hire can feel like it's a high stakes wager if you're a small business and you're trying to hire that person, right? Well, you want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. It helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Now, I can recall, back in the day, looking at a position on LinkedIn Jobs, for example, and inquiring about it with a contact I had, landing that job starting within 2 weeks. And that's the kind of thing that's a win for the employee, but also for the employer, because at the end of the day, everyone wants to quickly find the best talent out there. So add your job, add the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, guys, let's take a little bit more of a deep dive into yesterday's game. Now, Jarvis, before the Vikings game, all the fingers were pointed at Desmond Ridder as a reason for the Falcons' offensive woes. He was benched in favor of Taylor Heinicke, but the Falcons still lost. And like Tori told us earlier, being up at Flowery Branch today, there's confirmation already that Heinicke will indeed be a go next week. So can't really put the blame on him. He can't get most of the blame now at this point. But Jarvis, when you look at this week, and dare I say yesterday and last week as well, where does most of that blame squarely lie? Do you feel like it's a position group that's really not holding its weight? Do you feel like it's more of how the coaching staff is scheming for the opponent? Kind of where does most of this blame lie, especially as this team tries to reset and figure out how to get ready for the Cardinals next week?
I had mental mistakes. I dropped a video on Twitter, or formerly known as X, whatever you want to call it, and just it kind of gives you a depiction of just how things are just off. Like there was on the video, it showed that Byron Murphy was a cornerback blitz in the fire blitz coming off the edge, and Fisk and Cordell Patterson were right there. There was a slide protection. You saw them right there. They came up and presented themselves as if they saw Byron Murphy right there to get ready to block him, right? But for some strange reason, Cordell Patterson kind of drifted off and trying to peel back on and try to help out when it wasn't a necessary threat right there. And then Fisk just got lost. And Murphy ended up, putting pressure on Taylor Heinicke and forced him to step up in the pocket. Now, granted, Heinicke still made the throw and still made a really good throw and threw where the cornerback came from. But it just goes to show you, like, they're just mental stuff, mental things that just happen throughout this game on particular play, regardless of the result. It's just unexplainable. And two, the two penalties for Chris Lindstrom, just going back and looking at it, just like, what are you thinking? This particular situation, and like at the worst possible time that you could do it too, when you're on the goal line, the 1 yard line after a turnover, or when you're trying to drive down the field, and it's just a drive killer. And those things that, and then on the defensive side of football, now granted, I'm like Aaron, I'm not putting any blame on those guys, but just the missed tackles from the beginning of the game, just throughout the entire game, it's just like, yeah, you're going to miss some tackles, but man, y'all are picking the worst time to actually do it. So I'm putting the blame on everybody. I'm talking about from the head all the way down, from the play calling. Like, I'm still flabbergasted as to how you call a jet sweep with Jonnu Smith on the 1 yard line. It just don't make any sense to me. And your best tight end, who at least what you told me he is, like, he don't use him like it seems sometimes, he's blocking Danielle Hunter. Tell me how that's putting your players in the best position to succeed. Because people are going to question Jonnu Smith getting a jet sweep. Because those are the type of plays that you normally give guys that are playmakers that can make a necessary play to be able to get into the end zone or get the first down or whatever you're trying to do in that particular situation. So, yeah, I'm putting the blame on everybody. It doesn't go to one position group, but it just seemed like the mental mistakes that these guys have been making throughout these games had just been horrible timing. Like, it's not like I'm asking them to play perfect. Those aren't my expectations. But it just seems like when they do make mistakes, it is just costly.
And Aaron, when you look at that, where do you kind of see the blame, or even I'll kind of pull out that word, but maybe say, where's the disconnect coming from? Like, do you see any connection points of disconnect? And that can be on either side or both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of echo what Jarvis was just saying. It goes back to last week where against the Titans, the Falcons lost in all three phases. And while I won't say that they lost in all three phases against Minnesota, because I thought special teams did their job, it didn't feel like the Falcons won in any particular phase. They did good things, but it just felt like Minnesota was able to match them or exceed them in a lot of ways. And last week we were talking about how field position kind of killed them in certain drives in the second quarter against the Titans. And they got some very favorable field position in this game on a couple of turnovers, and the offense went backwards both times. They lost yards on those drives and had to settle for field goals. And so, when you're sitting here week to week being like, okay, you get these opportunities, and last week you didn't get the opportunities, or you kept shooting yourselves in the foot. And it felt like, again, this week, even though you were, given some of these opportunities, you kept shooting yourself in the foot, right? And you had the 2 turnovers on back-to-back plays in the third quarter, which I think was sort of the turning point for the game that really got Minnesota back into this game. And it just feels like, when you're trying to figure out, okay, who's the blame for that? Like, ultimately it's going to come down to the head coach, and he's ultimately the guy to be responsible for that. Even if he can't necessarily control Bijan Robinson holding onto the football, he can't control if Taylor Heinicke, as he said in his own words after the game, threw 5 yards behind the receiver, but ultimately is the head coach's responsibility to get these things right and to eliminate these mistakes. And that's, to me, where I feel like, where a lot of the conversation surrounding Arthur Smith that Jarvis was alluding to, where it's like, it feels like he's been outcoached the last couple of weeks. And, the whole point of this season, I feel like, was like, we don't know if the Falcons have a quarterback, but we believe that this team is a well-coached football team, and they just haven't looked that way at this point in the season. And that, to me, needs to be the biggest thing that needs to change. We'll figure out the quarterback later at some point, but at the very least, you got to look like a team that's ready to play each and every Sunday, and they haven't looked that way, especially on Sunday.
And Tori, when you kind of take that kind of big picture look, especially midway through the season, kind of where do you see that biggest reset? Does it need to be with a position group, a particular player, or is that a reset that starts with the coaching staff?
I think it's a reset with everybody. And I'll say this, I go back to something that Calais Campbell said in the locker room after the game. He was like, we need to get back to the basics. We need to play sound football. And I think that's something that I wrote in my notebook today, was that the 6 pillars, if you will, of football is passing, running, tackling, blocking, scoring. I mean, or that, I guess that's 5, but like, these are the things that, you know, are the fundamentals of the game. 7-year-olds are out there every single Friday playing Pee-wee football, doing these things. I understand that the game itself, as the years go by and as players get smarter and faster and stronger and bigger, that the game evolves, and every, you know, every moment in a game is its own entity. I understand all of that. But and that it's a strategic based game. But I do think that there is something to be said that simplicity can be a strategy too. And I would really like to see this team get back to the basics of who they are at their core. I think something that you saw, you know, this defense, they talk about attack and aggressive. Like, those are their monikers. Like, that's what they want to be known for. Do I think that they've been aggressive and in recent games? Absolutely. But I think you need to see, you know, safety in that aggression too. And when you attack, making sure that there are avenues in place to make sure that someone like Josh Dobbs doesn't leak out for 22 yards for a game-changing play, game-altering play. And then even going to that very, very last drive for the Falcons, where they are just pounding the ball on the ground with Tyler Algier just angrily running over people. That's who we saw what the Falcons were in 2022. And I know it's a completely different offense, a completely different team, but at some point, just line up good versus good and have them go at it. Because at the end of the day, I think the Falcons have so many weapons that on paper, if you look at it, you feel really good about the matchups that you have. So simplicity, I think, can go a long way here. And sometimes I think when things get too convoluted and you're trying too many different things, that it puts more pressure on yourself, when all you need to do is just get that 1 yard to get in the end zone.
Yeah. And I think too, and Jarvis, I know you wanted to chime in as well, but yeah, it made me think of something, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it made me think of something that Calais Campbell said, which is, we've just got to go out and win one game. And it may sound very basic, but I think Tori's onto something there. Maybe you just go back to being exactly who you are and executing on that. So keep it clean. For example, notes, minimize the turnovers and cause turnovers, and then capitalize on said turnovers. And I think that's basically where Calais Campbell was going. That thing that you do individually, or that thing that you do collectively as a position group, or that thing that you do great as a coaching staff, just do it. And then just stack it until that ends up being 1-0 against the Cardinals next week. Jarvis?
Yeah, I was just going to add to what, just kind of, add what Tori said, because when you think about that last scoring drive for the Falcons, that's what we saw. Like, outside of the big time throw to Van Jefferson, the big gain, and then a scramble by Taylor Heinicke, that was what, 11 straight runs?
Yep.
And how many times did we see that last year, remember? And it worked.
Yeah. And most of them to the right side of the offensive line, where the money resides. So I think that getting back to the basics is a great solution to all the issues that the Falcons have been faced with these past couple of weeks. And I think that Arthur Smith is going to have to take time on how they tap into that last drive, because I feel like that was probably the best drive we've seen, for the entire season, because that was a statement right there, and it should have been the game-winning drive.
And it may be one of those things where, although you hate that they lost, hopefully maybe they'll look back and say, hey, that's who we are. That's our signature. Just replay that in your head a couple times and then just put that on repeat. So we'll talk a little bit more about what it looks like with who got next, because we know that the Falcons are going to have to reset for their next battle against the Arizona Cardinals. But before we do that, Jarvis wants to tell you guys a little bit about FanDuel and give you some intel on subtext.
FanDuel is the #1 sports book in America, guys. If you haven't joined on FanDuel, you need to get on there right now, because it's the #1 sports book in America. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Yes, that's $150, So yes, $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money bet. $150 and bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. I'm telling you guys, if you haven't been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super safe. It's easy to use. You don't have to worry about anybody getting your information and all of that stuff, because, there's a lot of stuff floating around on the internet around there. That's what you need. And if you are wondering what you can do with those bonus bets, they have a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and much, much more. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. LOCKEDON. FanDuel, and kick off the NFL season, because we're halfway through and you still haven't joined yet. So yeah, go to the website right now, FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, because it is the official sportsbook betting partner of the NFL. I need you to go to joinsubtext.com/lockedonsportsatlanta, and you're going to be able to get access to myself. Whether it be during the games, we can text back and forth. I'm going to be giving my thoughts. Also, I got the all 22 breakdowns. I got a couple of videos that I've already got out there just to give you a sample of what it actually you're going to be able to get to. And you're going to be the only person to have access to it. So become a Locked On Sports Atlanta insider today, and make sure, guys, you go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSportsAtlanta. That's joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSportsAtlanta and become a Locked On Sports Atlanta insider today.
All right, guys. I promise we'll end rapid fire on a positive and a fun note that's going to be powered by a cool tweet that we got from our girl Tori. But first things first, I want to ask you guys, be real with me on this one, Tori. So I'm going to ask you to start us off on point 1 and point 2 of rapid fire. Hit or miss. So we're trying a little something different here, right? And for hit, that would be your player, your guy who you thought, hey, he did his job yesterday. He was a hit. The guy who was a miss, he ain't it. He wasn't it yesterday, but you want him to be it next week. Who's your hit? Who's your miss?
Oh, gosh, that's hard on the spot. I thought a hit was Arnold Ebiketie. I liked what I saw from him. I know we're talking about, quarterback leaking out, but I thought when AK was in, he did some good things, not just the strip sack that we saw Lorenzo Carter pick up and return to the 1-yard line, but I thought he was a hit for me. I'm looking forward to seeing kind of what he does moving forward. I think a miss for me, I go back and forth on this because I don't want to be like, because I'd never know what guys are being asked to do. But I will say it's not necessarily one person, but I do want to see a little bit more from the secondary. We've talked about these last couple of weeks how some of these explosive plays are happening. And I know that's something that Jesse Bates talked about in the locker room in Nashville. Like, we have to limit those. And I know I said last week, like, this is a secondary that has played really, really well. And I want to kind of see them get back to being a dominant group that doesn't give up these explosives.
Yeah, and I got to agree with you. You guys know I'm going to always co-sign on anything that has AK in a hit, because I absolutely love Arnold Ebiketie, and I'm still hoping to see him continue to trend up. But I agree with you. And we know D'Alford kind of left the game with the ankle injury. Richie Grant had the kind of close call with the concussion. But ultimately speaking, I agree, Tori. I think that secondary just has to find a way to just show up and ball out like we saw in some of those earlier weeks of the season. How about you, Aaron? Hit or miss from yesterday?
My hit is Jonnu Smith. He got the big explosive in the game. He's consistently been, the guy that when you get the ball into his hand, he can do some things after the catch. We saw, CP be that kind of guy for the Falcons in 2021, and he's been that guy this year. My miss is the other guy that I feel like when you get the ball into his hands, he can do a lot of things, but He didn't do it on Sunday, and it hurts me. Jarvis knows how devastating I am. Bijan was a miss. He wasn't particularly effective running the football. He had the fumble that was kind of the game-changing play. It was a rough day for Bijan, and we need to get Bijan back to being Bijan, Mr. Walk on Water, Mr. Turn Water into wine, all that stuff and more. And he you know, the wine was sour.
Blue magic, man. I need to see some blue magic.
Yeah,
what's going on?
Right. How about you, Jarvis? Your hit and miss from Sunday's game.
How about this? How about the trade deadline edition? Kentavious Street.
Mhm.
I really like what I saw from him. That was
Oh.
a hit for me. That was a hit for me. And he was and for them to immediately insert him into the lineup, I was like, okay, he was a starter. Like he was getting Grady Jarrett snaps. So for him to come in and play the way he did, I thought that was absolutely solid. And you know, hopefully he can continue to, you know, play that way, you know, going forward, because, you know, you got to put a little feather in the cap for Terry Fontenot for bringing in somebody who's came in and contributed right away. As far as a miss goes, and Aaron, you know, I think you might have an idea where I'm going with this. Mr. Bates, sir.
Oh God.
Mr. Third. Yeah, he had one breakup. That was cool. All good. But yeah, the only reason I'm saying it's a miss because I've seen him hit early on in the season.
And that's the thing.
Like,
he started off like
the interceptions. It just started off on a wildfire, and it kind of speaks to what Tori said. Like, yeah, they were looking really good to start the season, but I think, you know, it starts with Jesse Bates because he's the guy. He's the guy. You know, he's the guy that, you know, everybody that you can point to and say, hey, this is the guy we're supposed to be looking out for. Opposing offense is supposed to look out for coming into games when they're doing preparations and game planning and stuff like that. So for him to kind of just pop up every now and then during games, no, man, I need you to pop like consistently. And I feel like you just haven't seen that.
Yeah, we need magical Bijan, and we need no more pedestrian Jesse Bates III if the Falcons are going to get back in the win column. Tori, wrap us up with this. I want to read your quote from a tweet a little while ago. The info you need regarding Arthur Smith's mustache. Said he was awake at 3:45 a.m., couldn't sleep, so he shaved it. Said maybe it'll be cleansing, but he already feels like it has to come back soon. And you quoted him to say, I miss it already, but what is it, whether it's the mustache or something else, that's going to help these Falcons get their mojo back?
You know, you hope it's the mustache, because that thing has been a topic of conversation for months now. So, you know, maybe we'll be talking in a week from today being like, it's a good thing the mustache is gone. It's almost being treated like, you know, when you sage a room, like that's kind of how this feels like. Instead of staging the room, you're shaving the mustache. But yeah, I don't know what needs to happen, but something needs to happen. And if it's the mustache, it's the mustache. I will say, when he walked into the press conference room, it was kind of like a jump scare for me. I didn't know who was walking in the room at the time. But we'll see how this mustache gate continues as the season goes on. Because he said, he's like, I think I need it to come back already. So there's that.
Indeed. Well, you know, the Falcons are like Stella. They need to get their groove back. So on that note, guys, we appreciate you stopping by the Atlanta Football Party to talk Falcons. It's the best Falcons talk you're going to get from this crew. And don't forget, tomorrow, stop by the Atlanta Football Party where it's going to be all dogs talk all the time. See you then.